When we embrace all the stuff, suddenly work becomes fun. You start enjoying people and meeting, and you want to serve society because you're chasing passion. You're chasing impact. You want others to rise because you're so confident in yourself.
I want to thank you so much for joining me on the Beyond the Window podcast. I'm very excited to introduce Ajit and Harsha from EmpathifyU. I'm Sharon Vulner. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer and clinician at Ventana Treatment Programs. It is an honor to have you both here this morning. I want to start by introduce yourselves and what you do.
Thank you, Sharon. So first of all, we're big fans of you, your energy, and what you do in our community. So really excited to be here and share with you. So my name is Ajit Dodani. I was born in India, moved to the U.S., became a CFO. And I was born an empath, for those of you who understand that. Growing up in a brown household, I would feel more sense when I was whacked on my head growing up that men are not supposed to feel. And can you imagine that you grow up with that programming? And then I moved to the U.S., became a CFO of a company called United Colors of Benetton, had one incredible ride. Then as after the whole Benetton experience, started coaching organizations how to take empathy and convert it into superpower to impact people, culture, and profits. And it's been a crazy journey. That's a high level. We'll get into details, Sharon, but that's a snapshot. Met this beautiful lady that's by my side years ago, chased us since she was 16. That's a separate conversation, Sharon. We have 2 kids, and love for Harsha to introduce herself.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank you so much for inviting us here, Sharon. The work that you do at Ventana is so impactful. It's so meaningful. It's so needed. And I get emotional just thinking about the work you do because of our own personal experience we've had with our family, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I want to thank you because what you do is something that is so selfless. And you serve and give on a regular day, and you deal with so many different emotions. And we just thank you. Thank you. And the world is blessed to have people like you in their lives, to be honest. So, and your whole community and your whole team. So Ajit and I are married for 33 years. He's my heart and soul and the chief heart officer of our business, EmpathifyU. But he did chase me since I was 16. And, I have a completely different background from Ajit. I was born and raised here. Our parents are from India. But I lived a very white picket fence life, very privileged life. I didn't have to go through the struggles that Ajit did coming to the country and being here. My struggles came after 40, and my struggles came when my son was dealt with mental health challenges, and my whole world rocked with that. And mental health was something that I wasn't aware of. Mental health wasn't talked about, especially in our brown community. The stigma is very real all over, and 8 years ago, it was even more prevalent. But then being from an Asian family, you don't talk about mental health, And so when my son went through a mental health crisis, it was shocking. It was something that we had no awareness about. I share this story because I was actually hosting an event because we used to teach empathy in the schooling system. And I was at an event with my older son at a change-making event, and that's when Ajit had called us and said, you guys need to come back. Our younger son was not doing well, and he's going to be admitted to the hospital. And we didn't know, my older son and me didn't exactly know what was going on, but we were like, okay. And when we went, and happened to be, he was going through a mental health crisis and was admitted to the hospital, and my world rocked because I didn't know what anxiety or depression was. I didn't know the resources. I didn't know what was out there. And he was later admitted to the rehab facility, and he's doing great now. But at that point in time, we didn't have anybody to turn to, and our community wasn't talking about mental health. And my older son, and I still clearly remember this, my older son posted, I'm going to backtrack. So my son went into the hospital, and came out. And as a family, we came together and went to the school. And he went to a private Catholic school. And I, went to the school and I said, okay, this has happened with my son. And the counselor told me at that point that, I had a feeling something was off. And I said, well, then how come nobody reached out to me? And she goes, a few teachers came and, talked to me. And I said, how come I'm hearing about this the first time after my son has been admitted to the hospital? And she said, well, if we had to call every parent that's kids were going through something, it'd be 50% of our school. And I said, well, then that's a problem. Because if it's 50%, then clearly something needs to be changed, right? The education, the awareness. But the second problem is nobody told me about this. And anyways, I went in there and, I'm going a little bit into detail because I'm speaking as a parent and I'm speaking about in the education system about the awareness that needs to be there. But my son had actually sent an email to one of his teachers the night before he went into the hospital. And the email was at 1 a.m, and he was 15 years old. And it was 1 a.m, and it was saying, dear so-and-so, I'm not doing really well right now. In fact, something really bad has happened. But I'm writing to you because you're probably the only class and only class that I care about right now. I don't think I'll be able to take the test tomorrow, but I'm writing to you because you're the only class I care about. That was at 1 o'clock in the morning. In my head, that would be a red flag, like alarms going off completely, right? The teacher responded the next morning saying, next time when you send me an email, make sure you watch your grammar in your emails. And because his email was all in lower caps. And I'll let you get away with it just this time. But in the future, you can. And I was like, and I found out about this after the fact. I was like, are you kidding me? Like the first thing when you get an email from a 15-year-old, this is their response. But again, it was lack of education, it was lack of awareness. I don't know what it was. And I remember going to the school with my older son, going to the counselor and saying, okay. And my older son was with me because we'd just gotten in an accident. And my older son said to her, what is the game plan moving forward? What is the action plan for my brother moving forward? And she had given certain action plans, which nothing went through. No action plans were given. Went back to school like nothing happened. No teachers were notified about what had happened with him. He got called in the second week when he came back to school for detention because he hadn't shaved. And it was all these things. And I was like, what is happening in the system here? And I remember I told my son, I'm like, I need to go and talk to the school and I need to go talk to the principal and he said, Mom, this is just a big system here at this school, at the education. It's just a big business. And I was like, oh, no, you're not. And I went and I spoke to the principal and his answer was to me, and I said, you spend so much money on athletics and you spend so much money on taking care of your football fields, but what are you doing for mental health? And he says, well, we have one therapist. And I said, you have one therapist for 1,500 students and your counselor's telling me 50% is going through this? There's a problem here. And I went into a big story about that because that is why we're so passionate about this. That is why we want to create awareness. That is why, when this happened, my older son posted a message on Facebook and said, my younger brother has gone through this. And I was a little scared at that point. I was like, oh my God, you're going to tell the world about this? And Ajit is like, let him do it. Let him do it. And I was like, okay. And I got so many DMs from people saying, oh, my son is going through this. My daughter's. I'm like, why didn't you tell me? We could have this community be able to go through this together. Here I feel like I'm the only one. Why didn't you tell me about us? Like, we need to get rid of this stigma. We need to have parents know that we're in this together. We need to have that, going to a rehab is a good thing. That is something that can create prevention. That is something to give a support system. That is a good thing. That's nothing to be scared about. There should be no stigmas. That is something that's there to support our young kids, support our adults. So that is a long answer to this, but that's why Ajit and I are so passionate. We're passionate about, communities like yours. We're passionate about what you're doing, passionate about childhood matters. We're passionate because I wish I had more awareness 8 years ago. And we were very lucky that we seeked out after this, we seeked out and wanted to get ourselves educated. So we put ourselves in an environment that we could learn as parents is what we needed to change. How could we be better support to our son and other people? It's not about him changing only, it's about us learning and getting educated and finding the right resources for us. So, long answer to that, but
Wow.
That's beautiful.
and that's
Thank you for sharing.
about what
Thank
we
you
do.
for sharing.
Yeah.
And it's stories like this that do make an impact on listeners, on viewers, in our communities, is when someone says, I'm going through this.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people can relate, because it's kind of like that quote from David Thoreau, like, we're all silently struggling. No one is talking about it. And if COVID taught us anything, it kind of leveled the playing field. We learned that the pandemic is really mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And when people were struggling, COVID highlighted it. It highlighted their struggles. It was, I thought, oh, that's it. COVID is done. It's ending us. We all have to shelter and stay, and I won't be able to go to work. We actually opened up programs during COVID because there was such a demand for mental health on an international level. People were calling.
Yeah.
And they weren't just saying, oh, because of COVID, I'm struggling. It was, I'd been struggling all along and I didn't realize how much I was struggling. And then my anxiety, my depression, addiction, child abuse, domestic violence, everything was just bubbling and exploding. And now it's more of a normalized conversation. And I love when celebrities use their celebrity status to talk and normalize about mental health.
Yes.
And I love people like you, professionally and personally, making a commitment to our community about that.
Yeah. And just like Harsha said, we literally didn't have the access to the information and wasn't normalized. Growing up in India, obviously, you didn't talk about mental health. You saw the emotional dysregulation as normal. You saw adults that had abusive behavior, language. And it was almost like, hey, that's how it's supposed to be. And over the years, I'm a journaler, and I started writing people's behaviors and relationships that were warnings and examples. And so ever since I was young, I think somehow I found this framework of journaling. Nobody ever introduced it formally, but I would write everything. And then I'd literally watch an uncle or an aunt and say, warning, example. And so that's how I, quote unquote, learned. What I didn't want to do, there was no formal stuff around that for sure. And what Harsha's saying is right. That moment got us to really wake us up, and we had to understand it. And denial was not an option. We've had some friends whose kids have gone through this and they've stayed lonely and denied. And if there's anybody out there watching this, if your child is going through something, you'd be amazed how many of your friends, your neighbors are going through the same journey. And the more we honestly share, the more help we get, the more normalized it gets for us. And we're all on some sort of spectrum, right? So it's true. Can I talk a little bit about that COVID stuff?
Please.
So I was diagnosed with PTSD. I'll leave the incident out, but I was diagnosed with PTSD. And the way the incident happened was an intense day. And it just, I had no idea, right? Again, not aware of what an incident like that does. And the night comes in, I can't sleep, my mind, everything, right? And I'm sleeping next to this beautiful woman that I've, loved all my life, but I couldn't tell her what's going on through my head. And I say this because that incident happened 5 days later. I meet my doctor again. He goes, "You've got PTSD, and this is real. This is something you'll have to learn to live with." And, and he knew me a little bit. And I say this because he introduced me to the work of Dr. Tadashi, post-traumatic growth after trauma. And he said, you are one of those guys that I think may get it because it has the word empathy in there. And he knew how to kind of get to me, right? And he said, look, you can take the meds, and I'm a big believer in meds and all the stuff that you need. And it's not, you don't self-diagnose yourself, all that. And he said, look into that for a second. And I started a journey since that day, and that literally saved my life. And I say this because, I went through it, grew through it, and every day today I have to do something to show up. Every day. And I say this to everybody out there, that every day we all go through and have to go through our own regimen to show up in the way. Like if you meet me and you ever see me on stage, you're like, oh my God, this guy's nuts and crazy and all that stuff. But every morning you don't see the discipline that I have to go through. And I say this to come to your COVID point, and we all know this. In the last 5 years, before 2019, the cases of PTSD were 3% around the world. Today, primary or secondary PTSD is at 26%. People in healthcare environments, people in frontline, it's 46% and higher. You know that better than I do. So now why does it? Because me in the corporate world, I started seeing behaviors change. And I say this because my behavior changed. People who knew me before that day, May 28th, and the ones who that day, and then a few weeks later, they met, like, what's wrong with Ajit? He's behaving weird. And I say this because you may have a coworker, you may have a friend that may suddenly start behaving differently. Give some grace. Try to understand. Maybe they're going through something or something happened in their life. So then I casually started, because, almost a year and a half later, I started looking around. And during COVID, I started seeing it grow more and more. After my incident, casually I started talking to people about growth after trauma. And everybody's like, oh, I got the stuff that I'm dealing with. I've never shared it. So in the corporate world, I'm not a doctor. I'm an empathy strategist. I teach empathy as a skill. And I just started talking about it. And you'd be amazed, Sharon, how many senior leaders had never sought help, but I would get into conversations with them. And we'd start, literally, we've taught maybe hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, teams this framework about in a very digestible fashion, because they don't go seek help. And this becomes an introduction, like, oh, and when they get introduced to these frameworks, then they end up seeking help of an organization like Ventana or a therapist for the first time in their life. They'll talk about their financial planner and the person they work out at the gym, but they're not going to talk about a therapist. And then when you start normalizing those conversations, they start doing that. So that work has been very gratifying. And today, we're all going through it. We have to be really mindful. And that has taught me a lot about how do you learn to regulate yourself. The whole concept of being, I'm just going to say, one of the things that, let's link it to the work, right? One of the things that breaks trust in organizations is emotional dysregulation. And emotional dysregulation is a result, as Sharon, as you know, of unresolved stuff in our lives. Not taking care of ourselves, not being present. And we started documenting all this stuff over the years. I would write it down, and over the years, I've written a formula for trust, 6 things that build trust and 3 things that break trust. And one of the things that breaks trust in organizations, now some of you may not say, oh, personally, I don't want to do it, but if you're running a company, you're leading people, this is why you need to get help and surround yourself with what I call expert companions. And a therapist, a financial analyst, a physical, coach, a mental coach, all of those are expert companions around us. So if we do that and we can learn to emotionally regulate ourselves, we build trust. People speak up more, you innovate, and you make more profit. Now, those of you just interested in money, I just want to let you know that if you learn to regulate yourself and you're more present, you make more money. Sharon, and sometimes people only listen. I've had senior leaders get upset when we show up. Why are we learning about this empathy strategy stuff? It's a journey of self-awareness, stakeholder understanding, aligned to a business goal. And they get upset and they don't turn on this. And I tell you the story because it's my favorite story to tell. The senior leader didn't turn on the camera for 8 months. And the CEO told me, this guy doesn't like you. All the stuff that you're talking about, understanding your customer and employees, he's a very command and control kind of person. You've never met anybody like that, right, Sharon?
Never.
No. Never. Harsha, nobody has, right? Whew. Anyways, 8 months later, he turns on the camera. He goes, I just want you guys to know this is the best training we've been through. Changed my relationship with all of you, but it changed my relationship with my daughter. Sharon, through our work, he understood, one, that his daughter is neurodiverse, that he needs to change the way he communicates with her, and he needs to learn how to do a few things slightly different. Now, we include neuro-inclusion in all the work that we do. You've seen that. We talk about it. We're very public about it because, okay, now for some of you like, why are we talking about neuro-inclusion at work? Hey, 1 out of 5 of our customers are neurodiverse. So you better understand what the neurodiverse community wants. So if we don't cater our communication, our responsiveness, our product to accommodate for that, sure, employees, but that's an example of somebody that went down this journey of understanding these things and became a better person. So
I have a story to share about that.
Yeah.
And then I want you to talk more about how to build trust and how do you as an empathy strategist work. So when I first got into this field, my training as an associate, I was put in the special needs classroom, and the kids that were on the spectrum and ADHD and an emotional dysregulation, those were the people that I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got training in the classroom, and it was interesting to watch the teachers adapt their teaching styles to, oh, you're having an emotional outburst. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have you sit on a yoga ball. We're going to have you sit in the calm corner. We're going to give you some tactile stuff, and we're going to help you regulate so that we can get back in the chair and do your schoolwork. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're in your chair and you're throwing a pencil, now we're going to talk about the timeout. Like, that's not good behavior. And really teaching children, we're talking 5, 6, 7 years old, how to differentiate between a behavior and a feeling, and then how to self-regulate both. And I thought, this is genius. I'm taking this home. And that's how I raised my daughter starting at age 3. When I was learning all this, I'm like, okay, we have the self-regulation corner, and then we have the timeout corner. And we're going to, we're not in trouble. We're just going to understand that this is a difficult feeling. And we're going to be gentle with ourselves. And then when we're feeling better, we're going to get back to whatever we're doing. And then if we're acting out, we're going to address that differently. And then she took that, and that was like her thing. She was like, I'm meditating under a tree, and my teacher doesn't understand it, but this is what I'm doing at recess. And I'm like, you go. But then I kind of brought that into how I work with people, and I really thought, why don't we teach this to all children? Why isn't this something in a typical classroom?
Yes.
And then by 5th grade, the classroom was operating that way. So the school was definitely catching on because everyone had the opportunity to have a yoga ball. Everyone had a fidget toy on their desk. Yeah. Everyone take their own personal 5-minute time out and then come back to their seat. And I thought, okay, they're catching on. But then why don't we do that in the work world? Yeah. And checking in with staff and having leadership meetings. And I need to talk to you about your objectives, but can we just check how you're doing this morning? Because, it's hard to show up to work on time when you have a handful of things going on, whether it's road rage or dropping off kids in school. Let's talk about how we're going to take care of ourselves, and then we'll get into the business. So that's part of my supervision. But I thought we're supposed to do it that way. And I learned it that way also from my own experience when kind of like the warning signs in my training and the very directive, stern leaders. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do it that way. Okay, I'm not going to do it this way. But I want to hear from you because you do it at such a magnificent, bigger level. How do we teach people to do this and to develop trust and to lead with empathy? And I love your title, Chief Heart Officer. I think every business needs one.
Yeah, no, thank you. Actually, I'd love, Harsha, if you're okay, would you want to talk a little bit about why the neurodiversity is so important to us too?
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the workshops we talk about is supporting neurodiversity at work. And, the reason why it's very important to us is, again, like Ajit said, 1 out of 5 people are neurodiverse. But personally, we've seen our nieces and nephews that are neurodiverse and on different spectrums. And for us to see how there's so much, everyone is unique in their own way, right? But if we learn how to get the best out of everybody, we're going to get so much more productivity and profitability in the workplace. But it's about learning everyone's uniquenesses, right? And so with like our niece and nephew, our nephew, he was highly on the spectrum when he was younger. And the biggest thing that his mom did was was awareness, got herself the right team. She got herself a therapist. She got herself the education system to understand the schooling system. She did everything right rather than being in denial. She was like, okay, I'm going to embrace this and I'm going to give him the best opportunity he can get. And that was when he was very young. To when he's 18 years old now, he's thriving in college. He's doing absolutely phenomenal. You wouldn't even know if you didn't know that he was neurodiverse, you wouldn't be able to spot it. But it was because it started at a very young age of how she was able to get him the right support system. However, when he goes into the workplaces, there are certain things that the work environment needs to know about somebody who is neurodiverse, right? In order to tap into his geniuses and our niece's geniuses, her memory, she can spin circles on memory, the ability of her to go on a freeway and know every sign on the freeway and just see it once. I don't even know that, His ability to understand about data and analytics and to be able to put the pieces together, I wouldn't be able to do that. But at the same time, they're very blunt. Everything is black or white. Their communication skills may not be the communication skills that people in the workplace are used to, right? So with those they're for them, which actually for me, for anybody actually, right? We want to get an agenda in advance before a meeting. We want to know what's going on before we walk into a meeting, right? To prevent the anxiety, right? So simple skills that we teach companies of, hey, listen, before you set up a meeting, give an agenda with the meeting. Let know the expectations of somebody. Don't call somebody up and say, hey, do you have a minute to talk without letting them know? Simple things that somebody who is neurotypical would need to know, right? The other thing that we teach is when you're setting up a meeting, everyone has a different way of processing information. So when you're having a meeting, most of the time you have a meeting with 12 people, they're the same 3 or 4 people that are going to speak up at the meeting to give ideas and share ideas, which is great. You get ideas, but what about the other 7 or 8 people there? Maybe their learning style is different. Their processing style is different. So we tell companies, now listen, unless it's an urgent deadline or it's something you need to know right away, keep that meeting open for 24 hours. Allow people to submit their feedback through email or through chat. Maybe they don't want to speak up at that meeting. But if you do that, you're setting yourself up with so much success and so much more information because you're opening it up to different points of view. NASA, in fact, only looks for certain positions, not all, but certain positions in NASA, and this is according to Stanford Business Project, they look for neurodiverse talent to solve problems that others can't solve. So there are so many superpowers, but it's learning how to embrace it. I was recently working in the corporate world, and they were not teaching supporting neurodiversity work. It was a check mark. They weren't doing any trainings that, And I remember someone's performance review was coming up. And, there's 6 or 7 people in senior leadership talking about this. And I heard from one of the managers, and they all have to figure out who's getting the bonuses, right? And it's on a scale that everyone, depending what department, if they're on this certain salary grade scale, you're all equal. As far as, and we're only allowed to give bonuses to X amount of people. So everyone is basically trying to, stick up for their person, right? So that in itself is a problem. But anyways, this one person who was super talented, but socially awkward. So one of the seniors was like, you know what? She just doesn't know how to behave properly. And, she doesn't speak right. And they were going to base her bonus on that. And I remember talking to the manager. I'm like, have you ever thought that she might be on the spectrum? Have you ever, because she's super talented, but just because she doesn't speak the same language as the senior leader does, she's not, she may be rough a little bit on the edges, or she's just very bold and she's very blunt. But that's a strength also, to be blunt and to be able to tell it how it is.
Yeah.
You're going to base her performance review on that, but not on the productivity that she's bringing to you. And the manager looked at me, she goes, oh my gosh, you're so right. I totally missed that. I'm going to go back and talk to them. And I was like, yeah, So those are those kind of education pieces that some people don't know. And if you just create that awareness, you can flip the switch and say, oh, I had another manager I was working with. And she was like, I'm talking to her and she's so good, but she's just so fidgety all the time. And it's virtually, right? She's like, she's always moving around. She's using her hands and she's standing up and she's just so fidgety. And I just get dizzy when I'm talking to her. But she's amazing. Like, she facilitates and she's great. And I was like, do you realize that just might be her coping mechanism? Like, that's okay. She's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And there was a flip and switch again,
Yeah.
So we do a lot of education and training on that and provide different, just different simple steps that I think everybody needs. It's not only somebody who's neurodiverse, right? Everybody, wants these, but just creating that awareness and education that makes it different for companies to be able to say, oh, okay. Because then you're tapping into a whole set of talent and a whole set of results that you can get. Out of the box thinkers, like going back to my son, right? He's in the music field, right? And, when he was in school, he wasn't an in the box person. And they were used to just having people that fit that box.
Yeah.
He's brilliant. He's so brilliant. The way he thinks is so, but he's an out-of-the-box thinker. So you have to create environments for him to be able to succeed in that environment, And just like in the workplace. So, Ajit and I's goal, the reason we do what we do is we want to create a world where the next generation feels like they belong in all of their uniquenesses, because everyone is in some sort of type of spectrum. And we want to be able to create that environment for them in the workplace where they feel that they belong. We feel that they're safe, and they feel that they can show up as their authentic, beautifully broken self that we all are.
Yeah.
And to be able to thrive in that.
That's beautiful.
So
Yeah.
I like the tips about keeping the meeting open for 24 hours, and you say having grace and trying to understand where they're coming from. I say I like to get curious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so because you can't be upset when you're curious.
Yeah.
It just means you're inquisitive and you want to learn more, because that might be the missing piece to whatever we're all trying to solve. And really having the idea that everyone's coming to work, they're doing their best.
Yeah.
And if we can get curious about the different strategies that we can have as employers, it might be easier for an employee to adapt to.
100%.
Yeah.
And we got to look at here. For me, I'm an empathy strategist, because if, empathy, you can have too much empathy.
Yes.
And if you have too much empathy without the boundaries, without accountability, you can get in trouble.
Yes.
And I say this because for anybody watching this, I want you to understand what we're talking about, right? So think about neuro-inclusion. You're like, do I really need to do that work? So first of all, we need to stop the deism, because all of us have this deism running through our head. Oh, you don't say it. Oh, that person's weird. Oh, that person's strange. All the deisms that run within all our heads is real.
Yeah.
And it's happening all the time. Here, I'll give you an example. I'll give you stories. Companies that we worked with for years. Number one, saw their CX, customer service scores, increased by 18 points. That's huge. And this is a massive company that serves that, because they learned how to communicate with their customers better, because they had a very templated AI templated thing. This is why I talk about humanizing AI. You've heard me talk about that
Yes.
because you can use AI to respond to all your customers. Do it. Your customer scores stay the same, but you make small tweaks. And we did that. And literally first, again, you had people that bought and people that don't. Later in their quarterly earnings call, they say, this framework has changed our CX scores, because today there's a very clear inflection point where the human jumps in and gets off the script, and now they're trained how to do that, right? That's number one, right? So number two is we have a client, because they learned how to listen to everybody in their organization, started a new division, and that division added a couple of $1 million more in revenue. I don't know if you're interested in that, but I think that would be a nice little ad. But the greatest story is recent, where one of the CEOs I'm talking to, working with this technology company for years as a fractional I'm there and I know the CEO goes, I'm really frustrated with this person. And, we've been working at that time, this was about 2 years, for about 6 months. And I'm like, okay, and then we go through the coaching of each individual. And then we do this thing around we do the workshop around for all the employees. We did this workshop, neuro-inclusion. And then, I share my story. I talk about various things. And one of these leaders turns to me and he goes, I don't think I've ever shared this with anybody, but I'm severely ADHD and I don't have the guts to share it with my boss. All right. And I could sense it as I was starting to, coach him. And there was no self-identification in that company. But I asked him, is it okay if I coach your CEO to work with you better that I share this? He goes, please do. I just feel uncomfortable talking to him, but please do because I want that. Had the conversation with the CEO. That's what we did. We improved our communication across the entire organization. We increased accountability across, good standards. Clear communication, clear accountability, skill set. We added a new skill sets for people to learn, and especially the CEO to learn. Because the CEO is very ambiguous in his communication of what he wanted done and stuff like that. And it's best for everybody. Like Stanford Neurodiversity Project says, we've been following them for decades, says that when you solve for the outliers, everybody in the organization becomes better. So guess what happened? Because the CEO learned how to communicate better, have clearer standards, have accountability standards, upskill himself, that person who was ADHD now suddenly is thriving and providing the best feedback, because we just learn how to work with them. And I say this because most CEOs think, like I did at one point, that we're perfect. I just want to let you know the biggest cognitive research done for over 100,000 people, and none of us came out normal. Nobody is. So we are all on some sort of spectrum. So if we can learn, so if 1 out of 5 of us needs some sort of thing, I truly at this point believe 1 out of 4 of us needs some sort of accommodation. And in certain industries, we were with some healthcare folks yesterday, it's 1 out of 2 needs some accommodation. So if we learn to, and I say this, communicate clearly, be accountable, have great relationships, and relationships that you can really, like what you said, Sharon, right? Just getting to know the individual at a very human level and then have a skill set. Now, if you're able to build that muscle, because here's why you do it. The fit is going to hit the shan. I didn't cuss, so you can leave it in there. The fit is going to hit the shan. Every day, is it true, Sharon, as a leader of something happens. Yeah. And if we don't have these standards built in and taught, we actually do role playing. We do breakout sessions. Okay, and especially in LA, here's what happens if something happens to you. Scenario role play. You get sick. Something happens. Here's how we want you to communicate. Feel free. This is scenario role playing. Nothing is going on. Yeah. Because most people, they communicate clearly when things are going, but when the fit hits the shan, they don't know how to communicate. Right. And we need to train our teams around how to navigate through chaos. Thank you for reading that article. And learn how to communicate, learn how to say, hey, I just want to let you know, this is what I'm dealing with. Imagine if we'd done the scenario role play. Hey, if ever this happens in your life, here's because you're important, but we also know that the business has to continue to move. Most people don't know how to lead a company when there's a problem going on in the community. What if we scenario role played that, right? So people learned in advance, okay, if this happens, this is how we communicate. Here's what's going on. Here's what I was working on. This can go to that one. And all of a sudden, you're going through fires together. So
and that builds the team stronger, and that creates trust, and that creates empathy, and that creates camaraderie, and then it translates into family dynamics too. Because if we look at how we are in our family dynamics, how we are at work, sometimes it's completely separate individuals.
Yeah.
But what if we adopted a similar philosophy? Like we have a cheesy saying, let our family guide yours. And we are very family style. Sometimes we're a toxic family. Sometimes we get upset. We have disagreements. But at the end of the day, it's coming together. It's it's having the support, and especially in crisis where, in mental health, there's a lot of crisis. We have to be together. We have to work together. And so I love the skills that you're teaching, because it's not just about how to be a good employee, how to be a good employer, but it's how to be a good person. How do I address and regulate myself and check in with me so that I can be a part of a team, so that I can communicate clearly to get my needs met?
Yeah.
How do I call out sick, which I know will create a burden on my peers because I won't be there to pick up, and they're going to have to carry the load when I'm not there. But how can I communicate that so they're okay and I'm okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And will that be received?
Will that be received?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you asked about trust.
Yes.
So we won't have time to go through all the things that build trust, but I can tell you one thing that everybody can do to build trust is learn the concept of the power of presence. Because if we can be present for each other, we win the game. I mean, you know this. Most people show up at work. I'm saying focus because that's our expertise, right? Show up at work with 40% of their mental capacity not there. So how do you change that, right? First, you got to raise awareness of that, right? The idea of being present. How many of you have been in an environment where you're sitting at work, but at the back of your head, is my child okay? Are my parents okay? Are the bills going to be paid? All of that stuff is running through our mind. And that's the reality of today. The political, the social environment, the divide is clear, right? And it's not like it's changed too much. It's always been like this. This is, so we have to learn how to be present in the middle of chaos. And guess when the chaos, it's every day. So you've seen my posts on this, and I want to share this with anybody that's interested to learn more about this, is that if we can learn to be present for each other, the first thing I would suggest, again, it's a tip around that presence, is to follow, rather than a circadian rhythm, follow an ultradian rhythm. The ultradian rhythm requires us to reset our bodies between 80 to 120 minutes. So we all follow our circadian. We wake up in the morning, we do our exercise, all that stuff, and we get us, okay, now we're ready to work. But then we've seen the brain scans, and those of you interested, you can learn more about, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn or whatever. But I can share the scans, and you've seen the scans that by the fourth quarter of the day, your brain is fried if you're not following an ultradian rhythm. And we have now large organizations, multinational organizations, their teams are following an ultradian rhythm, which is a quick 1 minute to 3 minute break between 80 to 120 minutes. It's a BAM moment, breathe, get aware, and move. You breathe. I talk about it all the time. Take a breath in. Mm-hmm. And you let it out. And, when a CFO is talking about breathing, better listen. You get a good ROI on that. Anyways, get aware, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get aware. Look around. Just your mental reset. And literally, that's if you just do that. I love to dance. You've seen our posts about that. I just get up and dance. Harsha suddenly sees the music in my office blaring, and I'm just dancing for a minute just to reset myself, because I do it because the most loving and caring thing I can do for the community I serve is to be present for you. It is the biggest nonsense when somebody says, I've been grinding for 6 hours without a break. I'm sorry. I love you, but Harsha and I work really, 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 really hard. But we've learned that if I don't show up for Sharon, completely taken care of, completely present, she doesn't trust me because my mind is elsewhere, and she'll look me in the eye and say, and I say this because one of the biggest things you can learn as a leader is learn to be present. So follow an ultradian rhythm. So that's one of the pillars, one of the things that really builds trust. And we've seen, leaders that have phones around, leaders that are not present, and literally the best way to start a meeting, maybe I'll turn towards the camera. So you're about to walk into a meeting at work. One of the best things you can do to build trust is when you walk in, what do most of us do? Oh my God, it's been such a busy day. I've been going fire to fire. Do those people out there believe you're going to be present there for their meeting? Probably not. Here's what you can do. Start the meeting with the state intention. Hey guys, it's been a really amazing day, but I just want to let you know I'm present and I'm excited about this meeting. And I'm completely here for you guys. Just that statement, Sharon. Yeah. We've taught this And we've seen employee scores go up, engagement scores. We've seen all innovation ideas, people talking more. Because can you imagine you start a meeting? I've been busy, I've been running, I've been putting on fires all day.
Because
We
you're
all are.
acknowledging I'm here for you.
There you go.
I'm paying attention. I'm on my phone a lot. I've got two phones.
Yeah.
And I do start my meetings with, we're here. I will warn you, my phone will ring. Unless it's important, I'm going to glance and keep it gone. But letting people know I see you and this is important, and whatever is busy, buzzing or texting or ringing. It's not a distraction, and it's not more important than you.
Yeah. That intention.
And that builds trust. Absolutely.
Well, also your work is very different than the work. And when your phone rings, you have to look at it because a lot of times people are in crisis at that moment. So it's a different, but even for you to even say that is just beautiful, right? But if there is an expectation if your phone rings, because your work is different, right? You're dealing with crises. But one thing that I was going to say, what Ajit was saying, is that the other thing that can break trust that we talk about is really Ajit always talks about this, that between a stimulus and a response, there's a gap. And what you do in that gap can break trust or build trust. And a lot of times people choose the way to respond really fast in that gap. Something happens and they're the first thing to send a text message back or a chat message back, or, rather than taking that minute, taking a breath, thinking about what they're going to respond and not reacting, right? And that's something that has changed the game for a lot of people we work with, because you don't need to respond to everything right away. Right? Between that stimulus and response, what you do in the gap is either going to build trust or break trust. We were working with a client and they were telling us about, they were having trust issues. And one example we had found out that happened where they were working and, you have your teams chat and, there were different groups collaborating on this project. So everyone is chiming in their input and whatnot and about this project. And one of the managers says something on that chat to kind of call out the other person, basically putting two people against each other. She didn't mean to, but the way that message was portrayed in that chat completely closed off that person.
Yeah.
Completely closed off. And that person said, you know what, that wasn't my intention. But that person took the rest of the day off and just clocked out because of that one manager, the way that between that stimulus and response, she just went ahead and she ended up sending a message directly to the person and said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, sound so curt in that message. You took so long to build trust. That one message broke that trust just like that. Now, you can rebuild it for sure, but it's just, making sure that, like Ajit was saying, just being present, being aware, taking time for yourself to get yourself regrounded, taking that break every 60 to 90 minutes to do that BAM moment. So you're not reacting and you're not responding out of a reaction that can lead to breaking trust.
These are excellent points. And it goes back to where we started about emotional regulation. And if we could do that. And I love the BAM. Could you repeat that one more time? So every 60, 90 minutes where
you breathe, you take a breath, you get aware by following 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things you can see for, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and move. The M is move. So it's breathe, aware, move. And that's what we've taught across organizations. So you want me to go for the jugular? I think we're done.
I want you to go for the jugular.
Okay.
And then I want to know how our viewers and listeners can find you and learn more about the trust and all these amazing pieces of wisdom that you're dropping right here.
Okay, so the biggest lie we've been told is our values drive our organization. So you have stated values, and you have lived values. That's better. But you know what really controls the behavior in the organization is all of our individual shadow values. We all have 8 of them right on our shoulder. Right now I have them. Control, intelligence, superiority. And I tell you this because that's really the deciding factor of how an individual leads. You could have an incredible CEO, you could have an incredible leader, but all the managers' shadow values come out. Can I tell you the story of the worst leader I knew? Okay, I want to mention the name.
Married to him. I don't know.
So let me tell you the story of the worst leader I knew. This man right here. I was a young CFO, and as I told you, I journal, right? And my stated value was innovation, collaboration, all that stuff. After some time, I'm watching my team is not speaking up. Because guess what? My stated value was innovation, but my shadow value was recognition and control. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I wanted to get the recognition. I was not recognizing my team, and I saw my team back off. And I remember writing, I'm like, what is happening? Why is my team not coming up with ideas? It was me. Now, how many of you are like that? Your intelligence, your superiority. When somebody's speaking, you're like, he's only been here for 2 months. Do you know right now, in this AI world, we better learn how to listen in a very tactical way. I can tell you today, I'm grateful that I've reached a point where my kids ask me questions. I've changed my emotional dysregulation that I had to reach a point where they trust me. But one of the things that I've learned is I learned how to control my shadow values. And I say this because all of us have it. We show up in meetings, they show up in our behavior, they mute people down, you don't listen, and we leave so much ideas, so many ideas on the table. We hire the most brilliant people, interview, get me the brilliant person, and then our intelligence, I've been here longer, suddenly mutes them.
Yeah.
And we've been teaching this across organizations, and this one, a lot of people get uncomfortable with, but it's a reality. Because let's not dance around and, because I've journaled this. So one of the things that breaks trust is high expressions of shadow value. And all you need to do is you don't need to become a rocket scientist in this. All you need to do is look up those 8 shadow values. Your question, reach out to us. We'll share it with you, any one of us. And just reach out to us. We can tell you. And you have to just be aware. We're not listening to this person. Why is my behavior? That's what it is. So, that one gets people very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I say this, that when I learned how to control my shadow values, I remember, I'm typical father that did not have this. I want to link it back to the beginning of a story and parenting and mental health. I did not have a great relationship with my kids. I mean, growing up, typical father, fun, crazy. But, when they got to age where they started thinking for themselves, my shadow value of intelligence and control and the way I had seen parenting and I'd seen fatherhood, I wouldn't really be so dismissive of my kids. And they realized I didn't respect them, so they didn't respect me. And I remember over the years, just like what Harsha said, between a stimulus and a response, I learned to say, wow, that's a great opinion. Let me learn more about that. And over the years, I built that trust. Are we perfect? No. Or my relationship with my kids perfect? No. But my God, it's so cool that, today, because they understand that dad has his own mental health journey and he's proud of it and he's navigating it. They're like, okay, I trust him to ask a question. And I said, yeah, you can. It's easy to fool all the people outside. For me, the most important person I want to earn the trust of is this lady right next to me. I say this because it's so easy to put up a facade outside. Yeah. Hey, the world respects it. Great. Yes, it's important. You got to do what's right for. But man, for me, I want to make sure that if I turn to Harsha can always say, Ajit lives his values. If I'm living my values, I have my shadow values in control, I become a better husband, a better dad. Then I have fun at work. Most people have lost joy at work. When we embrace all the stuff, suddenly work becomes fun. You start enjoying people and meeting, and you want to serve society because you're chasing passion. You're chasing impact. You want others to rise because you're so confident in yourself. So, it's been a beautiful journey. So, yeah.
I appreciate all of your tips. I'm learning about BAM. I'm learning about the pillars of trust, the gap. I call it the pause. I need a pause.
Yeah.
Usually my heart starts beating and I'm like, I'm just going to sit on this.
Yeah.
And sitting and leaning back. So that's like my physical gesture of I need to look at the gap in between. So all this amazing information, self-regulation, how to be an employee, how to communicate, how to be a better employer. All of these are wonderful skills, not just for work, but also for like work-life balance. How to, be present. I love all of these wonderful things that you've shared and the magnetic energy that is always around when you're around. So how does one learn more about EmpathifyU? How can someone find you? You mentioned LinkedIn. What else?
Yeah, website, LinkedIn, so Instagram, that'll be, you can find us. We're everywhere. I think we post a little bit, Sharon.
You post a lot of it. And I shared with you actually before we started filming, following you has been a highlight for me because you two do videos individually and together. I saw your video on the let them theory, on your couples theory, how to work together, how to set boundaries with talking about your life, your work and dating. I mean, it's just all encompassing of how to live. Like they're really great rules for life. And so I love following you on Instagram. Who are you? On LinkedIn, who are you? And what is your website?
It's EmpathifyU.com is the website. It's Ajit Dodani on LinkedIn and Dodani Ajit on Instagram.
And it's Harsha Dodani on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. EmpathifyU with Ajit.
Nice. And I'm with La Ventana Treatment Programs. It's laventanatreatment.com and La Ventana on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn and all the things. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. It was energizing. I'm energized.
We want to say thank you again for what you're doing for the community. Thank you so much for your services.
Yeah, and as I shared with you, it was beautiful to hear from a client that used your services and walked away from here, obviously no names, and tells me that they had one of the most incredible experiences. And I say this because we got to normalize this. It just mentioned, right? And and this was just a conversation that led for him to make a call that led to him experiencing what La Ventana has to offer. And we're advocates of specific, very specifically about mental health institutions in our community, because we want you guys to raise awareness. And if our words can amplify your work, that's why we're involved with various organizations like Childhood Matters, want to support La Ventana, and all the other organizations, because I do it very selfishly, because can you imagine a world where all the kids that are coming to the workplace understand mental hygiene, know all the stuff? And we've had a chance to meet your daughter. What a beautiful, energetic soul that she is. And we can see the work. Is it anybody perfect? No, they're all navigating. But my God, imagine if early we all, spend time with the younger folks, and what kind of world would we show up in? Man, we'd start having fun again. And, so that's what we're after.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and watching. We are La Ventana Treatment Programs, and we are here for you. And stay tuned in for our next episode.